Borthakur IAS Academy প্রস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা Borthakur IAS Academy.
Hello everyone, this is Funny. Welcome to Borthakur IAS Academy. This is our daily Hindu analysis class for 7th September 2021. Let us begin with the first article today. Taliban claims total control as Panjshir resistance falls. It seems that the Panjshir Valley Northern Resistance or Northern Alliance 2.0 has retreated from Panjshir Valley. Right? It seems that the Panjshir Valley has been taken under the control of Taliban. So moving on to the first article for today, Taliban claim total control as Panjshir resistance falls. It seems that the Panjshir Valley has been taken by the Taliban. It means that whatever the Northern Resistance Front, which was termed or identified as Northern Alliance 2.0, has been kind of defeated in the sense that they had to retreat and accept certain losses. Now, the Panjshir Valley was the only bit of Afghanistan that was not under the control of Taliban. Once Taliban overthrew the government in Kabul, later on they concentrated by directing their forces in Panjshir Valley, and the battle has been going on for the last few days, where both sides were having heavy casualties. And the National Resistance Front, which is made up of anti-Taliban militia and former Afghan security forces who didn't surrender, they moved there and they started putting up resistance against Taliban. Now it seems that they had to abandon their posts, in the sense that they had to abandon the area that they were controlling and had to retreat to higher grounds. That is what the thing seems to be there. Now, mind you, this is Northern Alliance 2.0 or the National Resistance Front, again, which was entirely made up of anti-Taliban militia and also local fighters, the militia being local fighters who were loyal to Ahmad Massoud, who is the son of famous anti-Soviet and anti-Taliban commander Ahmad Shah Massoud, who was assassinated 2 days before 9/11 attacks in 2001 by Al-Qaeda. Now, it seems that he's safe, he's in hiding. Massoud released a 19-minute audio clip asking for the people of Afghanistan to rise up in resistance against the Taliban government, not only in Panjshir Valley but all across Afghanistan. And see, there is a bit of difference. Before moving on to the next article, let us understand why this resistance failed while the Northern Alliance 1.0, which was being led by his father Ahmad Shah Massoud, succeeded. There are some critical differences from that period of time and now. Now let us get into a bit detail. Might not be important for exam, but to understand why things are turning up the way they are, having some sort of an understanding of that background is a little bit important. Now let us understand those points. So things have a little bit changed since 1990s. It is well established right now Panjshir Valley is under the control of Taliban. Now when you look at the Northern Alliance in 1990, they were able to control the supply chains from Tajikistan into Panjshir Valley. Remember, any kind of war, whether it may be a defensive one or an offensive one, sustains on supply chains. If you remember, when we were discussing in the early stages, probably last month or so, when we started talking about the fall of urban cities to Taliban, one point kind of stood out. What was that? When Taliban surrounded these urban centers, the fighters, the security forces, Afghan National Army or the Afghan National Police Force, who were fighting and defending those cities, their supply routes were essentially cut off by Taliban, and thereby they didn't have guarantees from the central authority or the central government of Afghanistan that they are going to receive support, they are going to receive ammunition, food, reinforcement, air support or any other thing. Once supply routes are cut, your ability to make a stand goes down drastically, maybe a day or two, depending on how huge the fight is and the intensity of the fight involved. So in 1990, Northern Alliance was able to successfully establish a supply line from Tajikistan to the Panjshir Valley. it was a land-based one and an air-based one, but not important. But nonetheless, they had a continuous supply route from where they could get things that were required to put on the resistance, whether it may be the weapons, whether it may be men, whether it may be food resources, whatever it is. But they had a supply chain which this Northern Alliance 2.2 lacked, because Taliban kind of learned their lesson and they ensured that they encircled the Panjshir Valley. Now they surrounded the valley, and effectively by way of doing that, they cut off the supply chains for arms, ammunition, fighters, food, fuel, and what all is necessary to put up the resistance. Now the biggest change from 1990s to now is the support of Pakistan. It seems that Pakistan had helped Taliban in a lot of ways. Not only they supplied them with arms and ammunition, but there are certain reports that even they supported Taliban by giving air support through PAF, that is Pakistan Air Force. So when you have an opponent with superior air power, your ground-based movements or your ground-based strategy is going to be very, very, very limited. And the moment you step outside of your security, anywhere you step out of your hiding, you are open for attack. It seems that the Pakistan air superiority in this case against the ground-based militia or anti-Taliban fighters was very limited, and since the get-go it was skewed in their against and in the favor of Taliban. So that is the biggest difference when you compare it to the first Northern Alliance and the Northern Alliance now. Pakistan air support was the game changer here, and this put the favor in Taliban's scale against the Northern Alliance forces. Now again, the third most important factor is the support of allies. In 1990, when his father Ahmad Shah Massoud was fighting against the Taliban in the later years, remember, the Northern Alliance held Panjshir Valley was the only area or the territory in the Afghan history, or at least in the past 2 or 3 so decades, which never went under the control of anybody else other than the Massoud family. Mind you, during the Soviet invasion era also, it was the only territory that was not under the control of Soviets. Later on, when they Mujahideen defeated Soviets, again Mujahideen also didn't have control of this territory. Later on, when Mujahideen was defeated by the Taliban also couldn't take control of this territory. But things have changed, because in 1990s, when his father Ahmad Shah Massoud was leading from the front, the US allies supported Northern Alliance. They gave whatever was necessary to put up the resistance in that region. Now the US and its allies have completely abandoned Northern Alliance, despite multiple help requests from these leaders, right? The resistance leaders were consistently asking for international support. International community came together, they supported him, they ensured that his side of resistance won over Taliban, and that is how the Northern Alliance was supported by the international community. Now that is not the case, right? Because it is at this point it is very clear that many of the international communities leaders like US, UK, European Union, none of those people are standing behind this resistance, or despite a pleas from those leaders. So these are the few reasons that one might attribute to the fact that whatever the Northern Alliance 2.0, as it termed it to be, failed at this point of time. See, they just retreated. Again, a lot time has to pass before anything is confirmed, because the information that is coming out is not credible enough. So we have to be careful in judging on these factors. But once again, as I said, this might not be very important for exam, but having an understanding of what actually happened behind is also of a little bit significance. Now let us move on to next article. TN makes it official, workers have right to sit. So what is the one thing that you notice when you go to a shopping mall? Let us say you go to a shopping center to purchase either jewelry, either clothes, or any other thing, clothing items, or any other, as a matter of fact, where a salesperson is. The first thing that one might notice if they are aware enough is that you have seating arrangement for the visitors, that is the customers, but you don't have any seating arrangement made for the workers themselves. They are supposed. The idea is that for whatever reason they are supposed to be standing. Yes, when they are tending to customers, standing might be helpful, but when there are no customers also, you see showrooms that are empty, devoid of customers, yet the salespersons are standing. They have no seating arrangement. They cannot go around the stall and sit in the seating arrangement made for the customers. So, Tamil Nadu government brought in an amendment that recognized workers' right to sit. So, Kerala government was the first government to bring in these kinds of rules, because at one point of time, remember, Kerala is very active in terms of unions, in terms of worker rights, in terms of representing their interests. So after a lot of protest from various labor unions and labor force representatives over a period of time, the Kerala government brought in a state legislation that brought in the concept of right to sit, right? So Kerala government was first to brought. Now along those lines, Tamil Nadu government has also brought in an amendment to an existing act that makes right to sit a worker's right. Now this legislation was introduced through an amendment, in the sense that they are amending the Tamil Nadu Shops and Establishment Act of 1947, where they would be adding a subsection through which the so-called subsection 22 would read as: the premises of every establishment shall have suitable seating arrangements for all employees, so that they may take advantage of any opportunity to sit which may occur in the course of their work, and thereby avoid the on their toes situation throughout the working hours. Again, this is something that is sensible. You assume that that would be the case, but on contrary, that is not the case. Now the legislation, what is the intention behind it? The intention behind it is, or at least the reason behind bringing in this amendment, is that workers, as a result of them standing for hours together without any respite or being able to sit, there might be some health complications that they develop. So in order to prevent that, this amendment tries to bring in the concept of right to sit, where they will be provided with a chair. Each worker will get their chair, and they will be able to carry out their job with a lot of dignity. And not only that, they will have the discomfort taken out of their job as a result of it. It might reduce health complications that might arise out of remaining standing on their feet throughout the day for long periods of time. So again, this is again an interesting development. To just summarize what we discussed, Kerala was the first government to bring in the concept of right to sit as a result of protest from labor force and labor unions. It seems that following the suit of Kerala, Tamil Nadu is also bringing in the concept of recognizing workers' right to sit by amending one of their acts. Now moving on to the next article, social media cannot replace proper news journalism. Now before going into that, let us discuss a bit about what are the challenges journalism currently faces. It has to be said, whether we like it or not, there is a clear lack of quality journalism right now. I'm not saying that there aren't any quality journalists out there. There are plenty of them, and we should be thankful for them. When it comes to the quality of journalism, we have to at least agree on the reasonableness of the fact that the quality has gone down, right? There might be hundreds of factors for it. We cannot go into details as to what are the factors of it. We are aware of the factors, at least the main ones, but the quality of journalism has indeed gone down, This year is special because this year marks the centenary celebration of journalism being brought into India as an education unit or an educational entity, right? It meant that this is the 100th anniversary of journalism being taught as a discipline in India, right? The discipline of journalism education was brought in 100 years back into India by Annie Besant in 1920, right? The discipline of journalism education was introduced by British activist Annie Besant in 1920. So she launched a course on journalism at the National University of Adyar in Madras. So journalism 100 years back was introduced as a systemic way of learning how to carry out journalistic activities, how to do reporting and so on and so forth, and we have come a long way since 1920. There are now about some 900 Indian colleges and various other institutions that offer mass communication and journalism programs. Journalism courses in certain universities in India are internationally recognized for their quality and substance. And on the world stage, you have the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, which mandates that uphold freedom of the press and free flow of information. So this is where a lot of things have changed. See, the mandate of UNESCO is to upholds freedom of press and free flow of information. Now, this is where we have to make certain necessary observations. Let us look at the heading of the article. Social media cannot replace proper news journalism. So, what is the reality right now? Majority of the population, forget about let us relegate ourselves to India right now. Let us forget about other parts of the world. What is the major source of information for most of the population in our country? Social media, right? Who has more access to people than newspapers are media outlets? Independent YouTubers who make videos on explaining videos or whatever it is. So we are at a point in time and in place where credibility is attached more to YouTubers and independent, you can call them journalists, but at the end of the day they are not, influencers. Let us call them influencers. You have on one hand this independent influencers that are putting out information, and on the other hand you have journalists who are also putting a similar kind of information. But at the end of the day, when you look at the numbers as to whose output had more interactions, more views, more likes, more shares, it would be that of the influencer, right? On the one hand, you had an influencer who might or might not have any background in journalism. On the other hand, you have a veteran journalist who is putting out fact-based information, or any kind of information for that matter of fact, but his information is getting engaged in a less numbers than compared to that influencer. So social media has kind of brought in this revolution where information is being consumed, particularly news, from social media rather than conventional media sources, through newspapers, through TV channels, through radio shows or whatever it is. But nonetheless, majority of the news that people are consuming right now is through social media and social media timelines. Now coming back to the mandate, which talks about freedom of press and free flow of information, depending on whom you ask, the answer varies. But it has to be said that there is certainly restrictions that are being imposed on press around the world. There are attempts that are being made to prevent the free flow of information in various parts of the world. That is right. You have to understand and accept it, because we are seeing it in a day-to-day basis. Around the world, there are attempts that are being made by various groups and individuals to curtail the free flow of information. Again, in countries, we are seeing freedom of press being trampled. Now, let us look at the case of the nearest example. We are not talking about China, but let us talk about Hong Kong. Till few years back, Hong Kong was the beacon for growth, for expression, for freedoms. Yep. The moment the control of the CCP started creeping into the politics, the day-to-day life of Hong Kongers, daily Hong Kongers, you saw every aspect that you attribute to a free society being taken away. The first thing to go was freedom of press. Any pro-democracy news outlet that was operating in Hong Kong was systematically dismantled and shut down. The people who were running those things were targeted. The people who were contributing to those were targeted. And now we have no pro-democracy news outlets operating out of Hong Kong. What was the intent behind it? You are taking away the freedom of press because they were reporting the facts on the ground that the CCP has effectively taken control of the Hong Kong police and Hong Kong government, and they are trying everything in their power to shut down the pro-democracy movement, and they have succeeded. Because of Afghanistan? Okay. Just imagine few days back, were you ever thinking about what is happening in Hong Kong? Now, at least in the last 1 or 2 months or so, let us say the Afghanistan thing is in news, but the Hong Kong thing or the Hong Kong scenario has been happening for the last 1.5 years. Prior to this month, has any one of you given a thought as to what is happening in Hong Kong? Why do you think so? There is no information coming out of Hong Kong, right? Whatever the information that is coming out of Hong Kong is controlled by Chinese Communist Party. See, there are two ways of getting information. One, you get it through mainstream media sources. Second, you get it through independent journalism. Right now, whatever the information that is coming out of Hong Kong is coming from independent journalism, not from mainstream media outlets, because much of it is being controlled by Chinese Communist Party or the Chinese government. The problem with independent journalism is it doesn't get that coverage that a traditional media house gets. As a result of it, a lot of information is lost and people are not aware of what is actually taking place. So that is one best example of where the freedom of press was curtailed and the free flow of information was curtailed. As a result of it, the entire atrocity or travesty that took place in Hong Kong is gone out of public discourse. And I'm pretty sure that until I brought it up, most of you haven't even thought what is happening in Hong Kong. Maybe few of you might, but majority of you didn't even think about what is happening in Hong Kong. So that is what lack of freedom of press does, and that is what happens when you curtail the free flow of information from one place. That is why it is very important for us to ensure that freedom of press stays, it is protected. So that is why we should ensure that free flow of information is always there. It shouldn't be curtailed, right? But what are the challenges included in that? What are the challenges involved in ensuring free flow of information? In order to ensure free flow of high quality information, what we need is professional journalistic standards, right? In order to ensure that freedom of press stays as it is right now, you also need a journalistic or a journalistic journalism that is standard, that is built on ethics, that is built on principles, that is built on professionalism. That is how you ensure that the freedom of press stays strong and the free flow of information stays true. So in order to foster a democracy which ensures that dialogues takes place, that in turn leads to development, you need a professional journalistic standards that are essentially needed for a democracy, right? That is how you bring out the potential of media houses. It is not only a digital media, it can be a print media, anything, but at the end of the day, people who work in those outlets are journalists, and they should be of high professional standards. What is the reality right now? Multiple factors are transforming the communication landscape. Mass communication, media communication, any communication landscape you take, majority of the traditional systems and structures are being questioned. They are being uprooted from their roots, right? The question we need to ask at that point of time is the transformation that we are seeing in front of our eyes in these traditional structures, is the transformation affecting the quality of the product or the output? Is that impacting the credibility of journalism in this landscape? Right now the answer seems to be a bit of yes and no. Because of the glare of social media, because of the need to compete with social media as a news source, we are seeing traditional media houses, right? And I'm not only talking about companies, I'm clubbing them all together. Traditional media sources, in a bid to compete with social media, a lot of standards are being lowered. A lot of scrutiny is being taken out because they had to reach that people or the group first before anybody posts it on social media. So because of this reduction in quality control, because of this reduction or this need to reach first, need to post first, whatever the background checks that a traditional journalist would do or would carry out before publishing a story, before writing a story, before even thinking about a story, whatever the background work they would have generally done in a traditional setting, that checks and balances either by the media house or by the journalists themselves is gone. We are at a point in place where first let us post whatever we have right now. If somebody questions it, then we'll check whether the source is authentic or not, whether the information is true or not, whether it is credible or not. If it goes unchallenged, even if the thing that they have posted or they published is untrue, just because it hasn't been challenged by anybody, it stays on forever, and later on it becomes mainstream. See, that is how fake news starts, right? Recently, the author is a representative of UNESCO, by the way, so they recently published a handbook called Journalism, Fake News and Disinformation. Fake news and disinformation are two different entities. As I said, it is like they are competing for time and advertising. Then when you are competing for your own survival, a lot of things that make sense when you are not dependent on those survival instincts, there goes a lot of things that people generally do not consider when they are fighting for their survival. And because of social media, many of media houses, news, journalistic institutions are fighting for their survival, and as a result of it, even though they know for a fact that whatever they are doing is kind of questionable, they are forging ahead just to survive, right? As I was saying earlier, in order to ensure that we fight fake news, we fight disinformation, we fight misinformation, it has to be done from the initial stages of their educational system. That is what the NEP gives us in that form. You have the opportunity to instill any kinds of safeguards into the educational system itself while they were learning about journalism, while they are learning about their craft, so that their education becomes holistic, their education becomes multidisciplinary, it becomes inclusive. It also enables them from technological standpoint of view, and that is how it should be leveraged to teach value and ethics based journalism. That is how you fight disinformation. So that is what this article talks about, the problems with social media. Again, I kind of went into a bit extra because in order to understand what the current scenario is, what needs to be done, you need to know what is happening, right? Sometimes we may not be aware of what is happening, but just to survive, many of traditional media institutions are kind of circumnavigating the ethics based and value based journalism, and again, that is a threat to democracy at the end of the day, right? So that is what this article talks about. Now moving on to the next article. So this is entirely prelims based article. I don't think you will have a question in mains, but as I said, this is entirely prelims based question. Now, the National Bureau of Animal Genetic Resources (NBAGR) has recognized the Manda Buffalo as 19th unique breed of buffaloes found in India. India already had 18 unique breeds of buffaloes that were found only in India, right? Now, because of one scientist's efforts, we have a 19th unique buffalo breed that is found in India. What is the name of it? Manda Buffalo. Where we find it? We find it in Eastern Ghats and plateau of Korput region of Odisha. If I am pronouncing it right, please forgive me, but this is the two places or two regions in India where you find the Manda buffalo, which has been designated as the 19th unique breed of buffalo found in India. What is the uniqueness of it? It is resistant to parasitic infections, it is less prone to diseases, and it can survive and thrive on modest resources. You don't need to feed it constantly, or it doesn't need to be fed constantly or feed constantly. On its own, it can survive on modest resources. Not only survive, it actually can thrive on modest resources. To repeat again, this is the Manda buffalo, the 19th unique breed of buffalo found in India, particularly found in Eastern Ghat Plateau and regions of Odisha. Uniqueness is it is resistant to parasitic infections, less prone to diseases, and can thrive on modest resources. This is again prelims perspective article. Thank you. Stay safe. Namaste.
Borthakur IAS Academy. প্রস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা।
Borthakur IAS Academy.